ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to have you join us today on our webinar with former and current school leaders who have transformed literacy across their schools, especially at the secondary level. We're so grateful to our panelists who are leading the conversation on how to tackle literacy for older students, and we're so glad that all of you are here. In case you missed it, I'm Melanie McDermott. I'm the Director of Marketing at StoryShares, and I'm your host this afternoon. So first things first, let's just go through a little overview of what to expect from our webinar today. I'm going to go through an introduction, a couple of logistics, and then I'll introduce our panelists for today. And then we have plenty of time for our panel discussion, which we're so excited about. And then hopefully a little bit of time at the end for a Q&A. Just so you know, we have turned the chat on and there's also a Q&A function. Since we can't see any of your faces, we really love for you to participate in the chat so we can hear from you and chat with you. If you have a question that's sort of general for everyone, you can put it in the chat. If you have a more specific question that might be best answered by like one panelist, then that's a good option for using the Q&A function. Okay, so if you're new to StoryShares, welcome. StoryShares is a literacy organization that was founded by our CEO, Louise Bagelman, about 10 years ago when she was a middle school teacher. And she realized that she didn't have any books or compelling content for her students who were still working on foundational reading skills. And so she started creating those books herself, and StoryShares was born. At StoryShares, we know that literacy is not a finish line that's reached by grade 3. It's a lifelong journey. And so our mission is to change the world through stories by creating engaging, compelling, relevant content and resources for striving readers and for their teachers. Before I introduce our panelists, yes, okay, I do have the poll. We're just going to do a quick poll, if I can find it on my screen, to see who is out there in our audience today. Hopefully that just launched. You can just tell us which age group you're working with. Can everyone? Okay. Oh, I see answers coming in. Great. Looks like couple. Okay, a lot of mixed age group. Excellent. That's perfect. Some middle, some high school, some upper elementary, but it looks like most of you work with a mixed age group. Cool. All right. Well, on that, looks like we got some answers. And now I'm going to introduce our moderator and our panelists. So first up, our moderator this afternoon is our very own Louise Bagelman, founder and CEO of StoryShares. Louise, tell us about you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Louise. As Melanie mentioned, I started StoryShares after my own experience in the classroom working with middle schoolers and thinking about how do we address literacy for older students while also making sure they can access, rigorous and more complex content. So excited to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Welcome. And next up, we have Marcella Cargay, who is the founding principal of the Brooklyn Green School. Marcella, tell us more about you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. My name is Marcella Cargay. I'm the founding principal of the Brooklyn Green Magnet School for Eco-Activism. We are a middle school in historic Weeksville district in Brooklyn. I am a former assistant principal, a literacy coach, and an English teacher. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. Next up, we have Josh Zoya, who is the head of school at Phoenix Charter Academy, Chelsea.
Great, thanks. My name's Josh Zoya, and my route also went through Teach for America in the Bronx as a fourth grade teacher. I was a sixth grade history and science teacher, and I was a founding principal of Kip Lynn. And then I take a 15-year hiatus as a superintendent and as a leadership instructional leadership coach, and then now found my way back to where I belong, which is right in a school as a principal. So I'm in my first year after 15 years of being out of the seat, back in the principal seat in an alternative high school in Chelsea, Massachusetts, and very excited to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. We're excited for you to be here too and for your expertise. So thank you for joining us. Next up, we have Lindsay Dannon, who is a former teacher, former principal, system leader, and co-founder of Opal.
Well, I think you just introduced me. So, hi, nice to meet you all. I'm Lindsay. I also was a Teach for America Corps member in rural Mississippi. I was a teacher, a principal, a system leader. I am a current board member of a school, and I am also the co-founder of Opal, which is a social knowledge sharing platform for pre-K-12 educators. It's like a TikTok or Instagram, but for educators only to share best practices with each other.
So cool. We love Opal. So glad you're here. And last but not least, we have Zeke Vanderhook, who is a former principal, school leader, and the founder of Principal Powered Reading.
Thanks, Melanie. I'm also super excited to be here. My background, I founded a K-8 public school in New York City, served as the principal there for 12 years, about 1,000 plus kids, mostly Latino students. I think at heart, I'm still a teacher. I've taught reading and literacy to students from kindergarten through 8th grade, every grade level. And I think the reason I'm here, though, is because I founded a company called Principal Powered Reading. And the goal of the company is really to address a challenge that I think all of us have faced, which is in this age of smartphones and social media and AI, the challenge of reclaiming kids' attention and their drive and their motivation to read. So the way I do that is I teach a multi-session evidence-based workshop to K-12 literacy leaders to help them really understand the research on reading motivation and how to make it actionable. So super excited to be here. And excited for the discussion.
Awesome. We're so excited about this group of panelists. And now I'm going to pass the mic off to our moderator, Louise, to kick off the discussion.
Great. So I'm going to just dive right in with the first question for our panelists, which is a big question. What does it mean to foster a culture of literacy? And for this one, I'm going to have Zeke start, but then eager to hear from everyone on the panel who has thoughts around this topic.
Yeah. Thanks for giving me such a big question, Louise. So what does it mean to foster a culture of literacy? I mean, for me, I think about it in two parts, skill and will, right? So to what extent is a school focused on giving kids the skills to be able to read? And then at the same time, the desire to read, the motivation. And when I saw this question, one thing that really came to mind for me is like, how do you tell if a school is fostering a culture of literacy? And for me, one of the things is just the extent to which books, physical books, are a central feature of the environment. I mean, and that could be in many different ways, but the most obvious places are obviously classroom libraries, the school library. Do these things exist? Are they used? Do kids perceive them as exciting, fun? Is there a librarian? Are kids reading books at various times of day in the school at various places? Is there a culture of book recommendations? So I think oftentimes we think of these things with respect to elementary school, but I think it's equally important for middle school and high school. So I think my main point here is I really look at physical books in a school. And to me, that helps show the extent to which there's a culture of literacy.
Yeah, I love that. I won't go deep since I'm just a moderator here, but I love that. And yeah, I've found it to be an interesting part of our journey where there's the digital piece and there's so much around assessment and data right now, but to a certain degree, the power of the book in hand is, something people might have predicted would go away, but it does not. It persists. So that's a lovely way to kick this off. Love to hear from any of the other panelists. I know, Josh, you have already been really deep into fostering a culture of literacy, so not to call you out, but
You're gonna call me out. You just did, so I'll take it. I'll take the call out, the call in. And so thanks, Luis. I just want to be honest. We're very early in our implementation, and I'm not sitting here with a lot of success stories, but we're making them. We're building them. And the hardest thing that we have found about older students, and our students range from 14 to 25. And about half of our students are reading below a 5th grade level in high school. So we have a massive, massive challenge And it's just and these are kids who've literally not been able to read their whole lives in school, and to some extent, and they definitely cannot access high school level curriculum with literacy, the skills that they have. So literacy has become a huge negative, like a very, very hurtful and very kind of scary thing for them. They avoid it at all costs. And so for us, the first thing was just starting to try to rebuild this belief that it is important to read and that they can do it. And so like building the books being leveled and being interesting and leveled, so getting the right resources into their hands that and I would walk by the room and I would see every kid reading. I'm like, I haven't walked by a room where I saw every kid reading in years, like with this age level, with kids who are reading at such a low level. So I think for us, we're not like in the books on the shelf phase. We're in the like reading is not scary. You have to learn how to do it. There are actually like rules that you can follow, and that we can help kids who have literally had 10, sometimes 15 years of education and not learn to read. And so how do we convince them that reading is a worthy and, more importantly, achievable task? So I think just getting the right level of books that are high interest in their hands has been a huge step for us in the right direction.
Yeah, I love that you both touched on the motivation, the, emotional piece of the puzzle, which is so crucial and more challenging for those older students. So thank you, Josh, and Marcella. I think you also want to jump in here before we dive into the next one.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Louise. Just along the lines of what Josh and Zeke said, I think they were totally on point. Josh, I feel you. I remember starting a school and just really struggling to get students to take books home and read books and build their own personal libraries. But I totally agree with you, Zeke. It's about the environment, like creating an environment through beliefs, practices, and daily routines where reading and writing and speaking and listening are visible and valued and actively promoted. And there's this whole, everybody loves reading, and students are seeing the adults in the space reading. If you really want to foster a culture of literacy, you have to use literacy to build community. And if literacy is at the core of how you develop relationships and build community, then it will absolutely come.
Love that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you all. Lindsay,
Can I add one more thing? Yeah. I think one of the big pieces for me, particularly with older students, is read alouds. In elementary school, you see read alouds all day, every day. In middle schools and high schools, you see them less frequently. And they are so important because it allows kids to get into some really good content and see the joy of it and start to establish that.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Reading in all of its forms, and also, modeling it as something that provides access, but also enjoyment is an endless part of the journey. So thank you all. Well, I think we'll move on to question 2. And for this one, we're going to start with you, Josh. Describe the role of partnerships in your school's literacy ecosystem.
So one of the fundamental issues with high school is that no one is teaching high school teachers how to teach foundational literacy. None of us should get around that. And so even last year we tried to do this and we didn't have a partnership. And so we were just literally like going on the internet and looking for resources. And we were fine, how do you get a 15-year-old kid to read Frog and Toad? Like it's not happening. So we were doing our very best. We had a bunch of high school teachers who didn't know how to teach foundational literacy. We had a bunch of resources that were not effectively matched to the interests and the culture of our students. And we didn't get very far. Where we made a lot of progress actually was in our kids who were in middle school level, because we know how to teach kids comprehension. The place where we really, really floundered was fluency. We had no idea. That's just not something you learn when you're a high school teacher. And so partnering with StoryShares was a massive step in the right direction, because we get the books, which of course is helpful, but then it also comes with the training. It also comes with the ongoing coaching. It also came with a diagnostic visit, like a deep dive diagnostic visit. And also we're literally have student workbooks and teacher guides. for every lesson. And it's all set up in an integrated way. So the books and the teacher guide and the workbook are all completely integrated with whatever they're supposed to be learning at the phonetic level. And we're seeing like we just couldn't have done that on our own. We don't have the expertise, we don't have the time. And so by partnering with Story Shares, we were able to actually get all the pieces of the puzzle. Now it's still not really landing fully because we have to get good at it, right? Like it's not something we're just going to learn how to do in a week or a month or a couple months. So, this is the hard part. This is the awkward phase where you're not yet seeing the big change, but you're seeing a lot of good inputs, but not necessarily outputs. And but we're seeing a lot of really good change, and more importantly, our teachers are building their skills on how to actually teach kids the foundations of reading at a high school level. We have the resources, we have the skills emerging, and we have the ongoing support and coaching and the thoughtfulness on how we should structure our day. And so it's been really, really valuable, not just to have the books. I don't think anything would have changed with just the books, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you. Which is, yeah, a good note around our journey in general, where we started with just the books, and then teachers were like, "These books are great, but we need all these other things. We don't have a schedule that allows for. We don't have any training and foundational literacy skills, And that's the thing about my kids are in early elementary school. There's everything is aligned with and structured for early literacy foundational skills, and the problem is that once you get to those middle school, high school levels, you end up being on your own as a school leader in figuring out how to really implement it meaningfully and effectively. So, yeah, thank you, Josh. It's a good example of the challenges, but also the ways to start thinking about truly paving the way for how to deal with this more broadly, because it is a wide,
I think
widespread challenge.
If I had to add to that, I would just say it's an ecosystem. And if you don't think of it as an ecosystem, you're not going to make a change. You
Yeah.
can't just tweak one part of the ecosystem for this type of intensive support that's needed. And so we needed someone that could help us with the full ecosystem. And that was the key for us for an acceleration.
Yeah. Yeah, I always love the word ecosystem. So absolutely, you have to think about all the pieces intersecting and really serving each other. So thank you, Josh. Um, would love to hear from anyone else on this question around the ecosystem and yeah, the challenges when it comes to an ecosystem for those upper grades where it doesn't exist. You have to sort of create it yourself and partnerships. Any other thoughts on this one before we move on? All right. Well, we could just go to the third question. Okay, question 3. What are some strategies for empowering every educator to feel confident as a teacher of literacy? And this is something we talk a lot about, is that in especially the upper grades, if students are not reading proficiently, they are, struggling to access absolutely every subject, not just ELA. And so how do we sort of think this is a tag along to the ecosystem question when it comes to cross-subject literacy? So, Lindsay, I'll let you start with this one, and then we can hear from others.
I mean, I think this really does go with exactly what Josh was talking about around clarity. Like when teachers, in order for confidence to happen, you need clarity, you need support, and you need community around you, right? And so defining the what is it that you're actually teaching? How do you actually teach older students to read when the access is different? You're just crossing a different barrier than you do when you're teaching a first grader to read. It's a different experience. And so ensuring the teachers have all of that access to that information, and then the support, the coaching, the text, whatever it is. And I think, Josh, you did a good job explaining all of the assets that kind of come along with story shares, all of those supportive tools. And then the last piece is community, is getting to work with your peers as you're actually implementing this thing that's new and seeing what implementation looks like. And I think often in schools, we miss that because we are so busy. We are so busy to figure out the implementation piece. Like, what does it actually look like in practice? And teachers go back into their classrooms and start to implement. And then they're like, wait, did I do this right? How did it work? And they don't necessarily have the access to the community to go back and share and talk about it. And so I think that is a huge piece in building the confidence, is when you work together as a community, you get to see each other in implementation and talk about it, then change starts to happen.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, and I'm not sure exactly who's on this webinar from a perspective of school leaders versus teachers, but as a teacher, sometimes it can feel, like it's challenging to solve the problems in your classroom and to address the standards you're held accountable for. But thinking about how we can elevate that and really connect all the dots to make it meaningful and really aligned across the board. I know that when I was supporting students, not as a school leader, but as a teacher, my students were learning about like igneous and sedimentary rocks, and they couldn't yet access basic English, right? And so I had to work with the science teacher on bridging a lot of those gaps because otherwise it just was like siloed. So yeah, I'd love to hear from any other panelists on this question, or we can move to the next one. Anyone else have thoughts on empowering your educators? See?
Yeah, I mean, I can jump in here. Um, I mean, I think just piggybacking on what Lindsay articulated and also the challenges that Josh articulated, I think it is about professional development ultimately. And I think one of the challenges that with professional development is like, how do you do it, especially for teachers, let's say high school teachers who, it may not be their job to teach foundational reading skills, or that might be a perception. And to what extent do you bring in external providers who have the expertise? And to what extent is there internal expertise? I think one of the learnings that I had as a principal was no matter how much external support you can get, it is important to have one or two people who are experts in the building in, let's say, foundational literacy skills to address, let's say, the problem that Josh articulated. Because to Lindsay's point, if you just have people come in and do training, but then there's nobody to troubleshoot with, there's nobody who has the internal expertise, in some ways, it just doesn't have the same impact. So I think that's the only way to build confidence in anything, just like readers, right? Readers, the only way to build confidence from readers is if they have the knowledge and skills to read. um, and the same is true for teachers. If they don't have the knowledge and skills, they're not going to be confident.
And see, building off that, like think about how students get confident in their skills. They get immediate feedback,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I am a huge proponent of real-time feedback, real-time coaching, whatever the heck you want to call it, whether it's whispering, whether it's modeling, but like if you want to help a teacher be confident, you go into their classroom and you coach the heck out of them on a regular basis. It can be a 5-minute stint, it can be a 10-minute stint, it can be 5 times a week, it can be 2 times a week, but you want to help someone get better at teaching phonics, you go in there and you watch them teach phonics and you help them when they make this, they miss something or to do something and show them how to do it with their own students in their own classroom. That's where you're going to see the most accelerated advancement of teachers. And then they don't feel alone. Then you have to have a culture of coaching. That's a whole other webinar. But like it's if you have that in your building, then you have the infrastructure to make any change. So literacy is no different. But I don't see how you can teach phonics well without real-time feedback. Like how so much of phonics is about listening precisely, correcting precisely, noticing things. Like you don't learn that in a PD. You don't. It's not possible. So I think real-time coaching is critical to this movement.
100%. And I think the other piece of that, or the other half of that, is the model, right? So having that teacher who can do it, who other teachers can see and can go to, because it is hard starting from scratch, even with the real-time coaching. So I think finding those models in the building who you can say, oh, check out, Josh, or check out Melanie.
The hard part is in high school, it's not common to find people who are good at teaching foundational reading skills. Like that's a pretty tall order. It could be someone that used to teach elementary school now is high school. But yes, if you have them, great. If you don't, it's a slower journey for sure. You're right.
Yeah, and I think it's one of the like huge pieces that is at play here, which is that in K3 or even K5 in some cases, there are experts in the building, many of them, right? Every first grade teacher has been trained deeply in teaching phonics. And second grade teachers also know how to teach phonics. And yeah, what we see all the time is and what most of us uh, on our team also experienced was if you're a fifth grade teacher or a ninth grade teacher or an 11th grade teacher, you had no one expected you to have any knowledge of how to teach phonics. And so you had no training in that. And so it's sort of like the whole climate requires that extra training. So yeah, I think a huge, the coaching, the finding the models to like hone in on and then be able to expand from there is a valuable piece of
I
this
also think
puzzle.
something that I've seen change in the last, 3 to 5 years is access to resources that are not necessarily in your building, but are available because of technology. And getting connected to the right resource at the right time also matters, which is a huge ability. It's not the only piece, but it is an ability that has changed, and that I think is underutilized.
Yeah, can you say more about that, like an example?
Yeah, I mean, well, I obviously could talk about Opal, but I think that there's a space where you can find expertise in other buildings that you can have access to through Zoom, through different technologies. I mean, we designed Opal essentially for this purpose, which is when you are an island teacher, when you are the one teacher that needs to teach phonics or any part of foundational literacy in your high school and you need access to more teachers, it's having a community of teachers that you can learn from and that you can go to and get help for all in short form. But there's a number of different ways out there that educators can use that have started to surface.
Great. And I don't know if this is exactly relevant for this question, but the idea that in every subject you're encountering this, if you're teaching social studies or science, and the students are still struggling with the students are still struggling with foundational literacy skills, and the teachers are trying to teach to very specific grade level standards where there is no part of that that expects them to be teaching foundational literacy skills and they don't know how to do it is like, yeah, honing in on what are the gaps and where are their expertise within the building or elsewhere to try and fill those gaps. So it is I think as a key point here, it is like not something that has been fundamentally solved more globally. So everyone here is thinking about it at the frontier of the solution because um, we haven't designed education to address literacy in grades 3 through 12. We just haven't. And now we know we must. And so that's why this is daunting, but also exciting for its potential. So,
I think it was always there, Louise, and I think we ignored it. And I think COVID made it unignorable, if that's a word. Like it just made it shoved it in our face. And then we are started paying attention to all the loss. And then at that point, it just became so clear that we had a
yeah.
bunch of kids in the upper grades that didn't know have the reading skills they needed to succeed.
Yeah.
And now it's only playing out more and more and more as those kids flow through the system. It's just getting the impact is greater. We're seeing it magnified.
Yeah. Absolutely. I agree. I mean, it was there, yeah, when I was in the classroom way too long ago. So, and that was well pre-COVID, but certainly the kids who were in first or second grade during COVID and totally didn't get that instruction and are now, entering or in middle school. Absolutely. The moment is now, but it doesn't make it easy to address. So, yeah. Um, Mel, if you want to go to the next question. Question number 4. What recommendations do you have for enhancing literacy support for older striving readers? Either Josh or Marcella, whoever wants to start with this one.
I'll start. So, first, you have to, going back to like that first question, you have to make sure that you're creating a culture um, of literacy. You also have to ensure that there's a safe space where students feel really confident learning how to read. Um, and then again, that teacher support, the professional development, Josh was talking about, that real-time coaching. That's something that we're totally focused on this year, just being in that space and really supporting the teachers day to day and going back if you need to and having those conversations. And that comes from also building that. It's really important that we build those relationships with teachers so that they're comfortable and they're confident, so that when they are working with students, they're providing students with a safe space for learning how to read. And then also just finding those materials. I was excited when I saw the covers. I mean, something so basic as the cover of the Story Shares books I was interested in reading them. And I think that really helped us. Last year we had a vacancy and I had to teach a special education ELA class. And having those Story Shared books for my seventh graders who were struggling readers, it was super helpful. So just finding the books that they're going to be excited about, that's engaging, that look a little more grown up, but where the text is still accessible for them, and just making sure that you you give them a space, because I think that's the biggest thing. The one thing that my students would say when we were working on phonics with them was, we're not babies, we don't want to do this baby work. It was really uncomfortable for them, and for some students it's embarrassing. And so you definitely have to start with building a culture where they're safe and students are okay taking risks and learning something, and also understanding where they need their supports. It was really important to us to share their data with them, but not just give them a bunch of numbers, but to talk to them about why they're learning what they're doing, why they're learning what they're learning, why they're doing what they're doing. And again, then just having those materials that's accessible, helping them build their at-home libraries, and just really being a strong support system and making the environment super safe.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, that's so much of my experience at teaching was around that piece. Like, how do you frame up for a middle schooler that this is the book they have to read to practice when it's very clear to them, because we all know how aware students are in middle school and high school that this book was meant for a little kid. How do you sort of frame that up? And so ideally being able to, I think besides the instructional pieces and the coaching, like, just back to what you said at the beginning, Zeke, the books in the space piece, and then also practice, which is such a fundamental component of absolutely everything we do. It requires books they can read and want to read. And if the books they can read are the books written for first graders, they don't want to read them. And so, how do we offer them books that make them feel seen and engaged, that also give them the opportunity for success as they're practicing? Because if they don't practice, like, you can learn every skill that exists, whether it's in reading or soccer or, guitar playing, but you're never going to become a strong, you're never going to develop that strength and that skill if you don't practice it. So I love that you brought that up, because that's obviously near and dear to my heart too. Yeah.
But you have to give them something they want to practice. And I think this reminds me a lot of like medicine, how like so much of medicine is researched on men and then it's applied to women. And like supposedly it's just supposed to be all the same. And it's like these are not, just because they're in the same phase of their literacy development doesn't mean they have the same needs as a 6-year-old in
Mm.
terms of how to learn literacy. So not only is it like making it culturally appropriate, making it age appropriate, it's also thinking about how you bring it to them and how they receive it that's customized to them. It's more of a FUBU approach versus like taking something and putting a square through a hole. I'm going to put every metaphor out there today, but that's
I like the
the point is
food.
it wasn't matched. It wasn't a good match. It was trying to solve a problem that was not designed to be solved with the tools that we had.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a whole new problem. That's the thing.
Yeah,
Oh,
but that's like you ask how you get them to you enhance literacy support. I think that's the big piece is you get the stuff that is for them, that's designed for them, it's meant for them. They're the audience, they're the customer from the very beginning, and that is how you get them to be more engaged along with all the cultural pieces. But it's already a tough sell to get a kid to sound out a word, never mind talking about a baby topic. So I think this at least gives us a chance.
absolutely. Yeah, like relevance is so nuanced. It's not just like representation or cultural relevance, it's also age, interest, it's accessibility. Like all of those things fall into it's also interest. Like you could take any five ninth graders and they care about totally different things. So something they want to read, is not the same as their peer. How do you actually a lot of this is hooking them where they are. So yeah, I would love to hear from anyone else on that piece because I'm deeply aware of it. Even though my son's in third grade, he's not even at that point yet, but he cares about some things and not others, and that absolutely dictates what he will read. Like he's like, yes, no. Yeah.
Yeah, I just want to hone in on the point that you just made, Louise, about interest. Because sometimes I think, um, at least my own experience is we get it backwards. We focus a lot on literacy, we focus a lot on reading, and we might be better off, and I think Josh was making this point as well, starting with what is the child, the kid, the teenager interested in? And thinking about interest in a much deeper way. A lot of the research on motivation has to do with this. It's not like, okay, a teacher hands out an interest inventory at the beginning of the year and that's the end of it. It's like a genuine curiosity upon, and part of the culture of a school where interests, like what are kids interested in at an individual level, that can drive things. I still work with struggling readers at my old school. And just, I've been working with this kid for the past couple of years, 14-year-old girl. And I'm just reminded of her because she had some basic decoding skills, but was very disfluent. And over the course of getting to know her or whatever, I knew she was interested in mythology, but I didn't really appreciate the extent to which she was interested. Then she tells me, I don't know if you guys have heard about this, about Epic the musical. Basically, has anybody heard of it? I hadn't heard of it, but basically, it's like a series of music albums that set the Odyssey, Homer's Odyssey, to music in like a modern way. And she was really into it. She said, "Oh, I have to listen to it." And like after a few months, this very disfluent kid says, "I want to read the real Odyssey." And so we did. Now we were able to because it was a one-on-one setting. Uh, um, and she had familiarity with what at least the outlines of the story is. But to me, that really taught me like it is totally about interest. And sometimes like the material is actually very hard. Like the Odyssey, I think I read that in college or something. Uh, um, but that if you follow students' interests, you can really do it. And I think, the reality is that nothing is a panacea, but this idea of finding, whether it's after school or I think that to Marcella's point about like safety, like one-to-one really does something for safety. And even if it's like an external program and there are many good ones that you do after school, I think that is a place where kids can feel safe, especially if they don't have some foundational skills. And you can work on harder texts also because it's the one-to-one setting and it's driven by their interest.
Yeah, I think that I'm going to build off that, Zeke, to say like what makes kids motivated is winning. Like people, kids want to win. They want to be able to read. They want to feel successful. So like reading something they couldn't read, reading something they want to read, those are great examples. I also think there are many kids, depending on the kid and the age, that really benefit from this idea of how much you're improving and making it visible. So if it's early phase, like how well are they moving on dibbles if you're giving dibbles, like putting it up, making it public or making it private. But the idea of like sense of accomplishment and movement and that it's happening and that they're learning and that they're progressing. So like celebrating progression, celebrating learning. I think for a lot of older students, that actually makes them start to believe that they can do it. So sure, like accessing books and things that they want is absolutely at the center, and getting them to see their progress. That's a way of seeing their progress. They can read something they care about, but also like data wise, seeing their progress can be very motivational to kids at times.
Yeah. I love all those points. I think one of the things we talk about and think about a lot is that for older students who are struggling with reading and who are still developing those skills, there are two like really crucial truths. One of them is they have at least a somewhat loaded and likely negative association with reading. It has not been something that has made them feel good about themselves previously. And then the second is they as humans care about certain things. And so some kids are motivated by progress and growth, and some kids, maybe have even checked out from feeling like they can be successful in certain areas, but they are really obsessed with certain topics or certain areas. And so those are two like such crucial levers in my mind that you can tap into depending on the kid, which comes back to that individual piece that to bring them back in, because the challenge of teaching reading for older students is so different than teaching it in kindergarten or first grade. Where like they're just like here to learn it and they don't have all this baggage, and it's not this, they don't have negative associations about themselves, about the task. And it's not inherently discouraging. For little kids, it's just here we are, we're learning things. For older kids, you actually have to unpack some of that to get them to feel invested in it. And so sometimes it's about like the kid that wants to see their progress, and sometimes it's about the kid that just like loves this thing or this topic and is like, if they can see that they can access it once they have this level of skill, they are bought in from that. So I think a lot of it does come down to that individual motivation. Yeah.
Which all comes back to Marcella's point around building safety and building that I see you, I value you, I understand what you care about, and putting that in place so kids feel comfortable to start to break down some of those things and share what they're interested in. And teachers can learn that, what they care about, and then they can take the risks.
Yeah. Yeah, which is hard to do because it's of course like so diverse within any one classroom, let alone a whole school. But I think that piece is, yeah, I think it's the key to, you have to buy them in. Like you have at this age, you have to. And so them feeling seen and safe is, it's just like, Maslow's hierarchy or whatever. Like until you're like safe and fed, can't go deeper. So, yeah. All right. I know yeah, we have two more questions. So, question number 5. Um, what are some challenges you faced, which we may have sort of touched on, but we can go deeper, when establishing a culture of literacy for older students, and what solutions have been effective? Marcella, if you want to take an initial shot at
I'll
the
jump right in there. Wow, we've faced quite a few challenges. Just again, every teachers teach based on their content area, and even middle school teachers aren't trained to teach students how to read. So students come to us maybe on a second grade reading level, and then they have to access all of this science material or this social studies material. So really helping every teacher understand that they are teachers of literacy, even in these big grades of 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. That was a big challenge. Um, One way that we addressed that was we collapsed our teams for a time, and our literacy team was made up of ELA, social studies, and science, not just the English department, so that we could just make sure there was some continuity in terms of the practices across content areas, across grades. So that was super helpful. Also, just listening to the social studies and science teachers as they became better and better at this, and finding out, okay, what structures do you have in place to when you have students looking at informational text, not always expecting the ELA teacher to carry the heavy load and to be the ones that make all of the decisions. That was a big deal. Then also just the training part. We had quite a few team members that never even kind of thought of phonics, right? So we had to bring someone in. We had to really tap into district support to get get us all trained. So even the principal, we all had to go and be trained in how to implement these programs that's going to support students. And of course, the biggest thing is finding texts that are accessible, engaging, that students want to read, and making sure that we had choice and student voice involved in that. I think this is kind of a summary of everything that we've already discussed. It's all of those things are, can present boundaries that we really had to overcome. But I love the word. I wrote the word ecosystem down. I think I'm going to use it in my next staff meeting. Josh, thank you for reminding me of that. It's definitely an ecosystem. I always think of it as like this intricate puzzle. You have to have all of these different pieces in place, and one piece supports the other. So, I think definitely supporting the most effective solutions have been making sure that all the teachers were trained in some level of literacy instruction, and all of our teachers see themselves as teachers of literacy, and making sure that they understand that students may not come to you with all of that background foundational knowledge that you think they may have, and preparing teachers for that so that they can better differentiate and support students based on whatever their needs are.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Some of just the preparation and the awareness of this is a new challenge you'll have to tackle, and the interconnectedness. Josh, I know you have something.
Yeah, we have
Yeah.
more challenges than solutions, that's for sure. We're in the challenge phase, not the solution phase. But one of the biggest solutions for us is that our students are in a competency-based model. They every minute they're in a reading class, they're not in their like math class, and they're not moving through their high school graduation requirements. So it slows them down. That's how they see it. Like this is get you making me take that 65-minute class every day is actually preventing me from being in the class where I need to get through to graduate.
Hmm.
So it's actually considered to be an impediment. So how do we get them to be willing to make an investment? It's the same issue we have with our students who work. We have students who are working 40 hours a week. We're an alternative high school. I'm like, do you want to be working at Dunkin' Donuts when you're 30? Which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But if that's the only choice you have, that's not the what we wish for our students. We want them to have choice and freedom. And so it's a lot of like messaging, and a lot of trying to help them to see that by investing now up front, they're going to end up it's going to unlock all these other things for them. But it's a really tough sell to a teenager who's overage, trying to get through high school, oftentimes over the high school age. We serve kids till 25. And so like we got older kids who are trying to get through high school, been in high school for 7 or 8 years, and they don't want to take a reading class. So that's the big one. The only thing we have done that's led to some level of buy-in is when they are, like I say, winning. So like when they start to be able to read for the first time in their lives, like actually understand the words that are reading, it's a hook. They get hooked. So we have to get the right materials, the right level, and all that stuff has in the right skill in teaching it. But once we get them to start to make progress, that's the solve for the resistance.
Yeah, I love that. The
I
feel,
want to
it's
jump.
such a power. It's such a power to be able
Go ahead,
to.
Louise.
No, no, I'm
Sorry.
sorry. I just
I did
couldn't.
want to jump back in there because it's one thing I was just thinking about that really worked is bringing our families in and just having those honest conversations. Not only sending home data, but just really talking to them about what that data means, where their students are, what their students need, giving them ways that they can support students. If a parent struggled in reading, sometimes it's scary for them when you ask them to help their children at home or to support their children at home. So giving them other ways that they can support with literacy development at home, and really ensuring that they see themselves as and see us as their partners in this work. I think that was a big thing, and I definitely didn't want to leave that piece out.
Yeah, absolutely. Visible progress, no matter what, across the board is so crucial. So, okay, thank you all. Um, I know we're down to the wire and we have one more question, which maybe probably since this has been a rich conversation, we'll just Oh, okay. Touch on this, although we haven't gone deep here. We have touched on it, which is, and I'm going to leave this one open to anyone who wants to dive in. What recommendations do you have for connecting intervention or literacy access with core curriculum? And so this means not just like science, social studies across subjects, but also ELA, because something we hear and encounter a lot is that in, middle school and high school ELA, there is an expectation for them to access grade level standards, which are typically around comprehension, right, and analysis pieces, literary analysis. But how do we connect the dots between those foundational skills and those higher level skills, and any recommendations you all have from your own experiences there?
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Um,
I was gonna say I could talk about
that teacher wait time, we've all been trained for,
that.
for that wait time. I think the first thing I really want to acknowledge is sometimes you cannot. Sometimes it's really difficult to connect intervention with core curriculum based on the needs of that particular student. But there are definitely opportunities to. First of all, you have to look at that core curriculum and kind of work with teachers to identify areas where they can differentiate, where they can do student grouping, where they can maybe have stations. When there's more than one teacher in a room, I love an ICT classroom. I love paras. Anytime that there's additional supports, when you can break students down in those small groups and you can still work through whatever the core curriculum is, and support students by scaffolding that work and utilizing some of the tools that we have in our toolbox when it comes to literacy intervention.
Yeah, thank you, Marcella. And it's a tricky question. Yeah, Josh, you might have a thought
Yeah,
there.
sure. No, I think that a big one for us is that we're training all of our content teachers we have 8 2-hour trainings over the course of the year from story shares for our content team. And that's exactly why, because if this stuff is not being followed up with, if the strategies are not being reinforced and used in the classrooms, it's not going to land. Especially as you get out of phonics and into early comprehension and things like that. So we are absolutely committed to getting our full staff trained up on this stuff. The second thing I would say is that I've always heard that 80% of what we do in school is typically um, fiction, and 80% of what we do in real life is actually nonfiction. And so, like, this is actually not just something that's nice to have. This is like a need to have. Like, if we're not teaching kids how to read in science and history and other classes, we're not in math, we're not actually teaching them the reading they're actually going to do in the real world.
Yeah.
So, like, I think this is mandatory. Like, we have to have cross-curricular literacy efforts. That's what literacy actually is. That's the useful literacy for life. I mean, I love reading a good novel, but like, that's not what actually makes the world go around in terms of people getting jobs and living fulfilling and meaningful lives in many cases. They need those nonfiction literacy skills.
Absolutely.
And understanding how to break down the literacy concepts in science is really important in order to do okay in science. Like understanding how all of the pieces work together matters for a science, a social studies, a history teacher. It matters for a math teacher. Understanding where literacy is required in order to solve a problem.
Yeah, and for everything beyond school too. So yeah, thank you all for that. And it's something, and I will actually address a couple of the questions now, but thank you all so much for your responses. And just to like build on that, which is the fundamental role of literacy in absolutely everything. Like we're not preparing kids to like read novels on vacation. Like this is like trying to establish it as a foundation for absolutely everything and recognizing the role that it plays in all their classes and beyond. Like if you want to sign a lease and be able to assess it, like you have to be able to read it. And so so much of it is about the way it plays out across the board. We're spending a lot of time right now, story shares thinking about, you know, different types of content collections for science, social studies, but also like career readiness and how do you build texts that really support the development of all of those. Where you could do both in parallel, where you can develop your foundational learning skills and actually access more, complex content and knowledge-rich information. So I'm going to just really quickly speak to a couple of the questions because I know we're down to 3 minutes. Thank you all so much for all of your really insightful responses here. Um, Very quickly, UDL, which is Universal Design for Learning, making sure that students have multiple means of representation of new content and the engagement with it, and then also ways to respond with it is something we've definitely built into how we think about things all along. We actually worked with CAST Team UDL in the very early stages. And then similarly, Hill for Literacy, which Josh mentioned in the chat, is a professional learning program where we also partner with them to develop and to provide really deep and responsive professional learning and coaching that aligns with literacy. So those are two of the questions we had. Sorry, I'm not a great multitasker, so instead of reading the questions, I'm just sort of responding to them, but hopefully you all can see the chat. Um, You Fly, we've heard a lot that sometimes the books that are paired with the program are still meant for younger kids. And so we are working right now to do some alignment work there where there can be paired responses. Shira or Mel, feel free to jump in because I feel like you're both better multitaskers than I am here. I think those are some of the key pieces.
Yeah, I think you got them, Louise.
Okay.
Yeah, especially the Hill for Literacy piece. I think it kind of got answered in the chat, but yeah, we're working very closely with Hill for Literacy to support our program, Literacy Intervention for Teens. So there's a lot of alignment there, and we're really excited that that came up in the chat. And Josh had a great answer for that. So yeah, I think unfortunately we do have to close, even though there's lots of good stuff happening in the chat right now. But if you have any questions that we didn't get to, please email us at info@storyshares. Oh, and Shira just dropped in some information about the Hill and StoryShares connection in the chat. So you can click that link. I just wanted to provide, oh, I forgot. Well, we have a webinar coming up next month all about writing solutions for older students. So if you are interested in that, you can scan that QR code to register for that. And I did want to make sure I plugged all of our panelists' information so you can see their email addresses. There's also a QR code to learn more about Opal. Highly recommend, as an Opal user myself, that you go download it. It's really fun. It's like, it really is like teacher TikTok. And if you want to learn more about Zeke's work at principalpoweredreading.com, you can go check out his website. And we also are doing a webinar with Zeke in December. So more info coming on that. And I'm seeing it's 5 o'clock, so we do have to close things out. Um, Last thing, just like our story shares information, if anyone doesn't have it yet, we are so appreciative to our panelists taking time out of their very, very busy schedules, watching, a couple of you come zoom in from your schools. We're just so appreciative that you took the time to share your insight with us. And we thank you for being here, and thank you to all of our participants. And have a great night, everyone. Thank you.